Hello and welcome to episode 122 of Retropower Uncut, and unusually I'm not in the workshop, and this ties back in with last week's episode quite nicely, where I forgot that the Mustang wasn't, I forgot to do my piece about the Mustang because it wasn't in the workshop, and that's because it was here, detailed by Dale. So whilst the car is looking absolutely perfect, having been in his hands for this week, we thought we'd sneak over and have a look at what he's done. So let's have a look. Holy shit! So this is Dale, and this is the guy that basically does takes our cars to the final level where we can hand them over to the customer. Now a lot of people sort of question the final phase, where basically we're handing over to Dale to do the final machine polishing and then the ceramic coating. Now the ceramic bit's easy to explain. It's basically there to protect the car, makes it easier to wash, makes it more scratch resistant, basically makes it easier for the customer to look after. But the bit before that, where we're basically handing over a car to Dale to do something which we have the facility to do, it basically harks back to the fact that we're doing the full build on the car. So basically we paint them, do the machine polishing, the wet flatting before that, and then we get them to a stage where they're pretty good. But of course, no matter how careful we are working on these cars, they always get small scratches. Now I'm not talking about like key marks, hopefully, although sometimes that happens, but just the fine scratches you get, even just from a dusty car. If you just run your hand over it, it's enough to scratch it to some extent, if it's not ceramic coated. So the cars tend to get that kind of general scratching over them, and it's just nice to hand it over to somebody who's got fresh eyes. We tend to go snowblind. You've spent years in most cases. I think we've been building this car for over 2 years, looking at the same car, and you just can't see it anymore. So you hand it over to somebody who's got totally fresh eyes, and your objective is dead clear of just make this thing look amazing. It's just so good to do that, and so you can do that machine polishing to the level that you're happy with, and seal it all in, protect it, and get it to the state where it's easy for the customer to bring it back to looking this good after they've taken delivery of it, and they're not scared to use it, because just a light brush of maybe a bit of tree or something down the side of it, and I don't mean massive branches, but that sort of thing which might mark the lacquer on a non-coated car doesn't on this. And it's again with washing as well, like it's very easy. It's so easy to sort of lightly scratch a car if you don't wash it in the right way, and the ceramic coating really helps avoid that. So yeah, this is the finished product, and we're about to hand this over very shortly to the customer to put into their collection. Oh, here we are back in workshop. Well, actually in the kitchen, and I'm going to have myself a coffee. The Retropower blend been going down well, so if you want to get yourself our coffee, get on the web shop. And actually, it's probably a good time to buy some t-shirts as well. Or I'm certainly praying it's a good time to buy some t-shirts, because I'm absolutely sick to the back teeth of it being freezing cold. This seems painfully slow when I'm trying to like fill just the right amount of time speaking whilst my coffee is making, and realising I've massively misjudged it. But yes, it was good to see what was going on at Dale's place. It's always good to see him, and he's actually been fettling some other cars for us in the meantime. Right, okay, I'm going to lob that spoon down there. Follow me. Right, so I'm going to start with this because it's right here. Today I've been going through basically a forward planning session on this. We had the brakes pulled on a little bit on this Then I had a conversation with the owner last week, and he's in a good position to crack on with it now. So Adam and I were just going through job listing essentially, the forthcoming work on it, and it's looking good. One of the next things we're going to do is the radiator pack. We've got this steel mock-up that we did when we were doing the metalwork on the car. We just need to do a few details on this, where the fans are going to go, mark on where the top and bottom hoses are going to go, look at the details of how the heights and positions of the caps, etc. And then once we've got all those details marked out, we'll do a little video brief, and then the video and the radiator mock-up will go to Concept Racing, and they'll be making the final aluminium version for it. And then yeah, we're just listing the rest of the jobs. So we've got engine management wiring can go in, the heater plumbing can go in, the aircon plumbing can go in. I've just been having a bit of a plan on the interior design. We had a rough plan for this originally, but when we did the original renderings for this car, it was actually going to stay silver, which was the original colour. And it was only subsequently it ended up the green colour. So we're getting our head back around the interior design. So yeah, basically all set to make some good progress on that. In the background over there, George is continuing the work on the Morris doors. However, the big thing on that this week is that last weekend Dean came over and dropped off the remaining upholstery, or the remaining upholstered parts. So there was the rear bulkhead panel, the sort of subwoofer surround piece that fits onto that, the parcel shelf piece, and then there's the two covers that sort of sit almost where the rear seat base would be in a normal car if it had rear seats. One of which covers the battery area, and one of them covers the remote servo area. So they're all there, so we've got everything we need now to crack on with the upholstery and that. And actually, he also dropped off the front seat parts for the Land Cruiser. He's still working on the rest for that, so he's actually on with that now. There's the steering wheel, dash top, rear seats, door cards, but we've got the front seats here, really happy with that. We've used like a woven leather on the centres, and it's a really, all of it's from Spinnybeck, so the leather that we've chosen is like a really soft, supple black leather. And then the weave is basically the same leather cut down into 7mm strips, and then it's all woven and laminated onto a backing. And I think it's going to look really good. It's kind of classy looking, but still in keeping, you know, still simple enough to be in keeping on a car like that. James finished the gearbox sump pan mods. I think he was underway on that last week, changing the dipstick tube basically on the transmission pan. That's been finished, fully welded, leak tested, and then I saw him blasting that earlier, so that's now blasted, ready for paint. So that's that. NSU, the guys painted the scuttle panel last week, and the black grille that sits into that, so that's ready to be fitted. And then the main area of focus was the bumpers. I think I mentioned last week that the owner had come up and listed a few more things he wanted us to just tick off before he takes the car back to finish it himself. And one of them was bumper brackets and bumpers. So we've fabricated completely new bumper brackets for it because they were totally rotten. And then the bumpers themselves, there were quite a few little dings and dents. They're actually stainless steel, so we can sort of work dents out reasonably easily without having to do any kind of recoating on them. So I can't remember, it was Tom or Scott actually, that's bad of me, but one of the two of them, I think it was Scott, was working all the dents out and then basically body filing any remaining imperfections. And then Rich has been then taking it to the next step, sanding all the file marks out and then polishing them up, and then I think Nat was helping him with that as well. And we've got to the stage where they're pretty good. I need to have a conversation with the owner actually, because there's the odd scratch on them that's a little bit deeper. And essentially I need to know what level he wants me to take him to, because to get those deep scratches out, we'd have to sand quite a substantial amount out, and obviously you can't just sand one area, because then you end up with low spots that look wavy in the light. So we'd have to sand quite a large area across it, and it, you know, it could easily be quite a few days' work on that. So I need to sort of know the level. I think we've probably judged it right as it is. They look pretty darn good. Actually, the guys are just mocking the rear one up at the minute just to check the bracket fitment. And then as soon as they've checked that, the brackets are going to be painted. So that's where we're at with that. Manta. Yes, you will be pleased to know, as I was extremely pleased to know, that the wheels, finally we were able to build the wheels. The remaining titanium bolts arrived. So John got those sealed up, built up. They've got tyre pressure monitors in them as well, so we put those in and we've had the tyres fitted, and then yeah, I think it was yesterday afternoon, got those on, and yeah, extremely happy with the look. There's still a couple of things to do on the fronts. I think are totally done. The rears, we were expecting to have to use some spacers. We actually planned to do spacers all round because the centres of those wheels are a casting where the back is machined completely flat. If there's any protrusion of the brake caliper past the hub face, you have to put some kind of spacer in there. And we knew we needed to on the front, so we designed basically spacers and had them machined with that engage on the centre bore and into the centre bore of the wheel. And the sleeve nuts that we've used go down into precisely sized holes in the spacers as well, so that locates the spacers perfectly. Now we knew we needed them on the front for the brake clearance. On the back I was planning on doing the same size spacers, but I thought I'd just try the wheels on the car through all the suspension travel before I did those spacers, in case we wanted them to be narrower or wider than the ones on the front. But yeah, having tried it all, they actually want to be exactly the same. So we're going to do the same set of spacers on the back that we've got on the front, and then that will be absolutely perfect to that point. And just got, I think, the 12mm, so it'll just be a little wider on the back. And then the gearbox came back from rebuild, which I think it had come back last week. John and Adam have got that in now, and that allowed us to then get the prop shaft in, which is good. Bobby had already done the cross member for the centre bearing and everything else to do with that, so that was just a straight case of fitting that. So yeah, drivetrain's complete on that. I think we pretty much could, if we wanted to, fill the fluids and drive that now. Although in reality there are other jobs we're going to do before that. But yeah, that's excellent. And then Project E-type, a few prongs of attack on that. Plumbing, we want to get it rolling next, so we're looking at the plumbing that has to go over the rear axle, which goes in before the rear axle goes in. So we're doing the brake plumbing and the fuel plumbing. Now we've used ATEC Hardline for that. If you're not familiar with ATEC, they're a UK manufacturer of motorsport performance brake lines, fuel lines, fittings, basically fluid systems. Really good people, extremely good quality products. So yes, we've used ATEC Hardline for the brake plumbing and the fuel lines, which I think he's just starting to make now. That ties in with the fuel tank, which he's just been working on, and we're basically going to be designing an in-tank injection pump setup that goes through the original sort of hatch in the tank, but introduces a high pressure pump into it. So we're working on that at the minute. James has just been doing some modifications on the battery tray, so we're relocating the battery to the off side of the car from the near side, because the near side is going to be housing our new HVAC system. And on the subject of the HVAC system, I talked last week about that I was planning some of the changes on the dash. I hadn't quite decided basically until I had a conversation with the customer and looked into it a bit more. And now I've basically got to the end of that design and planning process now, and I know where we're going with it. So we're going to have the original type, or original looking Smiths Taco and Speedo, but there will be new builds with stepper motor drives in them. And then the whole of the central part of the dash, which is the big panel that normally has the 5 gauges in it and the switches at the bottom, will become a screen. And then the plan is that we're then going to have some buttons underneath that, sort of referencing the original button layout, except the legends that say what those buttons do will be displayed on the bottom of the screen. And one of those buttons will be a mode button, so we can actually, because we're controlling all the electrics via PDM, when you press that button it will change the legends on the screen and the function of the switches. So essentially we'll have 5 or 6 switches which will be able to do multiple functions. So I think it's 6 switches, it'll do 18 functions, and when you press the button it changes the labelling for the switches. We're also planning on using those buttons to control the new HVAC system, and we'll have matching displays on the screen. So when you adjust things like temperature and fan speed, you'll actually see those the information on the screen to tell you what temperature you've set, what direction you've set, etc. And there was one more thing on that. Gearbox. The gearbox was dropped off by the owner. I don't know, I'm not actually sure why it was still in their possession, but we needed the bell housing because we're having the new 5-speed conversion built at the minute, but it doesn't need the original bell housing because the adapter goes onto the old bell housing rather than to the engine. Oh, and the other thing is the throttle bodies. So the Genvi Heritage throttle bodies and intake manifold arrived, as we've come to expect with Genvi. All looks awesome. Can't wait to see them on the engine. And as we progress through the build, you'll see a bit more about the detail of that installation, what we're going to run it on electronics-wise, and we'll see that progress as we go. And on that note, I think that's probably everything for in here. So I'll hand over to Nat to see what's been going on in the dark side, as he calls it. I'll see you next week. Say that. So, hello folks, and welcome to another episode of Retropower Uncut, the fabrication side. And we're going to start once again with Project Kuma, the second Mark 1 Escort that we're currently building, or Mark 1 Escort-ish car that we're building. There's been a good bit of progress on this again this week. Scott's been doing some work on the front end, and a little bit closer to getting all the front end buttoned up. Getting everything mocked up. He's made a little mock-up radiator-shaped piece of sheet steel just to keep everything in line. We've had a couple of bits of the front that needed tweaking, so he's got those tweaked. That's all coming together, but again, Scott's been doing some other jobs as well, sorting out some bumper mounts that were probably mentioned earlier and a few other jobs, so he's not been on that all the time. He's got a little bit done there. Sam's been busy getting the seam brazing done. I think I've mentioned this before. Probably even mentioned it last week, but I'm going to mention it again, just in case I didn't. Rather than seam welding, we tend to seam braze body shells, but we do it with a TIG welder. We would refer to it as TIG brazing. People call it various things. Basically, we use an almost pure copper rod called Sifsil Copper 968, which is a copper silicon alloy, so people tend to refer to that as silicon bronze. It's actually 98-ish% copper. You can see some evidence of it down here. Sam's been doing that all over the car. It's a TIG deposited copper alloy rod. It's less prone to cracking than steel. It's more dirt tolerant. And it's just a nicer way of doing the job, basically, than using than actually welding the seams. So Sam's done that everywhere that he can do now on all of the spot welded seams that are accessible with the car still attached to the jig. We've still got to do the underside. That's earlier today we've been kind of working through the sequence of events because we've got 3 cars sort of in the row that we're going to be looking at in a minute. They're all getting to the stage where they need detaching from the sort of centres of operation that they're currently on. Obviously this is on this select bench. The Churchill Jag is on another select bench, which it needs to come off soon, and the Project 1 Escort is on a 2-post lift, which it will also need to come off soon. So we're sort of planning the sequence of changes required there in the background. So Sam's got all of that seam brazing done, and he's moved on to doing some work in the boot area, making off some more closing panels to separate the boot area from the rest of the car, and we'll come on to that in a minute when we look at the Project 1 Escort. So that's what Sam and Stu are looking at the moment, is getting the torsion springs that open and close the boot back into place, because they are very tight on one of the panels that Sam's been working on, so they're just working out the fit of those, and that's a tricky operation. As anybody knows who's fitted those springs, they're under quite a lot of pressure. So getting them in and out of the hinges is actually quite challenging, especially if you've not done it before. So Stu's just guiding Sam on that a bit, and we were just joking about springs stuck in eyeballs. That was well timed. I was expecting to see somebody with a spring in their eyeball just then. But yeah, they're quite fierce to attach and detach. So yeah, that's what's been going on there, and I think that probably sums this one up fairly well. We'll march on around here, past a select bench that will be having a car on it quite soon. We'll wander around to the back of Churchill. And I'll pick this up on the way because this is quite relevant. I'll take Stu's punch away from it. This is one of the bits Stu's working on right now, which is an infill panel to go there. That demonstrates quite nicely actually.
That's a little section Stu's made up just since lunch actually, which is going to go and form the joint between the new chassis rail and the original inner wheel arch. That'll be spot welded to the wheel arch, or plug welded I think to the wheel arch, plug welded to the chassis rail and the boot floor, and then he's got a corner section and a corner bracket to put in at the front end, and then all this can be plug welded. Stu's been fabricating this corner of the boot floor, getting that welded in, sealed to the quarter panel. He's made a couple of fine adjustments to the surface of the quarter panel to get that up to the correct shape, because there are a bit of metal finishing and adjustment there. He's been on shrinking a couple of small spots on the quarter panel to get that pulled into its absolute final position. Then he's got this welded in. It's welded in the crush tubes for the I'd say bumper mounts, they're more for the rotisserie mounts, but he's put crush tubes through the chassis rails. He's welded them into the boot floor. Got most of that corner of the boot floor in, so he's getting that section of the rail done. He'll be doing the same section for the other side. If we come round here, he's been finishing off the insides of the rear wheel wells, the rear sill capping piece that finishes off the sill at the back. He's been doing the rear fillet sections that close off the rear of the wheel arch into the rear valance and stop all the dirt being thrown into the lower part of the valance by the rear wheel, and getting that sorted out. In the background, and sort of not on photogenic work, he's been sorting out the radius arms. I think I might have mentioned him last week, but he's got a solution on the radius arms. We're going to fabricate the radius arms, and we're going to use a pair of the rear type radius arm bush, one for the front and one for the rear of the radius arm. We've tested because we know that we know approximately the angle they've got to rotate through. Originally they were mounted in two planes, a vertical plane at the front, horizontal plane at the back, or a lateral plane at the back. We're going to change that to two horizontal-ish planes mounts. So he's just checked the rotation available on the standard Jaguar bush, which is plenty enough without overly straining it. So we're going to use that type of bush front and back and make our own radius rods for reasons that were explained last week. And the other thing he's been doing at the back is making up the bump stops, which we've used on a couple of our builds before. These are some old ones. We're using I believe it's the droop stop for the front suspension, which we cut down, and then we'll put a couple of V-cuts into these to cushion them slightly more. But we use a modified front Mark II Jaguar droop stop as the rear bump stop. And then these brackets are just drawn up and CNC cut, and then that welds to the side of the rear chassis rail, because you'll notice, you'll have seen on plenty of videos, but once again, obviously all these parts will be rebuilt. These are mock-up parts at the moment. All of these parts will be refinished to as new. When they're actually fitted to the car, all these have got to be stripped down, new bearings, speed blast, all the whole sequence of events with all the parts, but at the moment they're rough and ready. These are from a X300 Jaguar. These are X300 uprights, but on an early 1960 something S-type rear axle assembly. So we use the late outboard brake setup, which we prefer for a variety of reasons, and then the bump stop is designed to work with the X300 upright, but the early type subframe, well, it actually mounts onto our new rail and makes sure that the clearance is there. We've got the wheel travel, everything's been checked there, so that's all good. And yeah, progressing to very much the latter stages of, certainly the very latter stages of the heavy end sort of metalwork on this, and we're actually getting towards the latter stages of the main panelling up. We've still got to make a boot lid. To that end, funnily enough, we've in the background, one of those little things going along in the background is that we're not 100% happy with our wheels, our rollers on our English wheel. We've had a couple of niggles with them which have come to light when making larger panels, where we've realised that although it's only very slight, there is a little bit of eccentricity in those rollers. On the wheel as delivered from the manufacturer, there is what I would term an unacceptable level of eccentricity in the rollers. I've just been talking earlier to Adam from Trent Precision Engineering, who are now going to be making us a new set of a new upper roll and a new set of anvil rollers for our wheel, because truing up the originals is going to be pretty much as expensive as making a new set, with less of a guarantee of them being accurate because of the difficulty in holding them. So we're going to get a new set of rollers made up for that before we make this boot lid, because we've had some issues fighting inconsistencies in the results from the wheel, which are consistent with an eccentricity in the wheel, i.e. the inconsistency we get is on a pitch coincident with the rolling circumference of the upper wheel. So one of the many things that goes on in the background, and the many little niggles in your day-to-day life of making things in metal, is that we really have pinned down the problem to the rolls on there. As I say, a dial gauge on them, you can read either way. It depends how much load you have on the bearings. The amount of flex in everything does make reading the exact run out quite awkward, but there is definitely run out there, and it definitely creates a noticeable deviation in the effect when we're wheeling panels. So that's getting fixed before we do that. And then there's a lot of metal finishing to do, as evidenced by Stu's little pen lines. There's a lot of metal finishing to do, plus we've got a lot of finishing work to do on the doors. However, we'll probably take the car off the jig before we do that and try and get it onto the lift so that we can do the underside, all the pipework planning, fixture, all the various bracketry that needs to go under the car, and all the other jobs that need to be done with the engine and transmission in, but not on the jig, so that we've got space to work underneath, and prior to it going onto a rotisserie for us to spin the car upside down to do any finish welding and weld dressing, that type of stuff underneath. So what will probably happen is we'll pull the engine and gearbox out, lift the car off the jig, put it onto the two-post lift once Project One Escort's off the lift, and put the engine and gearbox back in so that we can do all that work on the lift. So yeah, lots of things, lots of ducks have got to be lined up on these three projects very soon. That's pretty much where we're at Churchill. Moving on to Project One Escort. Oh dear, somebody's been swapping the fixtures over in the folder, and the bolts have just rained on the floor. Sam's also been doing some work on this, and I'm going to move round to the back and gesticulate from the back of the car, because that'll be easier to explain, I think, because the work on this has been largely towards the back. You may remember from last week that I'd knocked up a couple of arch lips for the outer edge of the inner wheel arches, that being that side. That's the arch lip for the inner wheel arch. I've made one of those for each side of the car. Now Tom's carried on with that job and has finished making the inner wheel arch for this side. I don't know if it's lying around or whether it's over there. Yes, he has. You stay there, Jamie, I'll run through and get it, and then I can wave it at the camera. Tom has now taken my crude shaping and refined it and made it nice, and turned that small wheel arch lip, which looked like that, that was made on the epoxy hammerform tooling that was used to make the outer wheel arches, so that conforms pretty much exactly to the inner profile of the outer arch. And then he has joined that, as you can see in here, he's joined that to this straightforward rolled section with a tank rolled corner, so it's got a nice radius. So that inner arch now extends the arch tub right out and then down, and then we can spot weld this return here, can be spot welded into the lip of the outer quarter panel, and we have a huge amount of wheel clearance in there, enormous wheel clearance right out to the quarter panel. That's very, very close to the quarter panel there. There'll be sealer applied in there. It means that we've got the maximum wheel clearance, but we don't have any joints into the outer quarter panel anywhere other than the normal spot welded seam. So it keeps everything neat there. There's no potential for paint cracking from the arch tubs or anything like that, because obviously we don't have any sort of fiberglass bits covering anything up. The metalwork is the metalwork on this car, so there's no hiding those joins. So it all wants to be done nicely and on original type weld seams, which it will be done. So that's that one. So Tom's now working on, he's just rolled these two pieces for this arch tub. He's just welding them together. Then he'll be cutting in and welding them, getting them tacked up in the car, getting the lip trimmed down, getting both of its tank rolled, and getting all this one wheeled up and made to shape. He's then going to be moving on, hopefully, to shaping up the outer arches for the second car. All being well, that should be Monday-ish, hopefully. In the background, Andy Hall, who obviously isn't here, he's working from his workshop, Vintage Machines, down at Marton, near Rugby. He's working on the front wing extensions, the wheel arches, which are proving a bit of a battle. We thought they were going to be, I think I mentioned that before. He's doing those in halves, front and rear halves for each side, because when you shape the wheel arch, the land that you require effectively the flat land that goes onto the wing of the car before the wheel arch extension, that's actually the material you've had to move the furthest, and because you are starting from the highest point and moving that material down, you actually have to shrink it. So he's actually got a skirt of probably 5 inches of material that's all got to be shrunk on a jig using a hammer and a chaser, which means you have to gather that material and then flatten it out and gather it and flatten it out. It's extremely skilled hammer work, really, really very challenging job. But he's getting there. He's done 3 halves. He's got the 4th half left to do to make the pair of front wing extensions, and then he's got to get them scribed out, cut together, TIG welded together, planished, and then he can bring them here with the wings. We'll cut the original arches out, get the wings mounted to the car, get the new arches in position, scribed out, tacked in, then planish all the tacks, then take the wings off, fully weld them out. So there's a chunk of work to do there, but that's all progressing. Now I can show you what Sam's currently on that car and has been doing on this car, which is this panel underneath here. Originally was a bit of cardboard on an Escort, a bit of hardboard, I think, actually, more technically. But something that a lot of people don't really think about on an Escort, particularly, or on lots of cars in general, is the air exit. When you blow air into a car with your HVAC system, air conditioned, heated, whatever you might want, getting air into the car is great, but it has to go out somewhere. Actually, for all their age, these are fairly well sealed cars. The windows sort of aren't hanging out the sides. There's not air blowing out of the doors like there might be on a sort of a 1950s 50s British vehicle or something. They're actually reasonably well sealed. So you do have to let that air out somewhere, and that's here and here on an Escort. But the air coming out from there and there actually gets into those bits from under this area, which is normally hidden by the boot shut. It's actually that actually lets air out into the gap around the boot lid as well. That's an extra air exit. But the air under here obviously has to. You don't want water getting into the car through that, so this area drains its water out through here into the boot shut line. The water runs around here and drains out here. But the air from inside the car gets into that through the vents in the rear parcel shelves, and they actually go into the boot aperture area, and then the boot aperture area then vents into this bit. And in the original production car, there was basically a piece of cardboard there held on by some bendy tabs that made that air more directly link from inside the car to here, and the leakage into the boot area in and out of was sort of incidental. Well, because we're putting a fuel tank in the boot, which obviously the Escort had originally as well, we kind of want to, even though these are not competition cars, it seems to be a good engineering principle and a good safety principle to firewall as best as possible the fuel tank area from the inside of the car area. So what we have done in the past and are doing again on here is making a panel under here which is held on by these by some little M4 spot weld stud welded studs underneath, a panel that closes off that section in a reasonably airtight fashion from inside the boot area, so that the air now coming through the vent in the rear parcel shelf can only get to this area under the rear scuttle and can't access the boot area. So that just keeps it just means that the area with fuel related things in is completely sealed from the inside of the car. And to that end, Sam's also been working on some templates for a panel that goes between the inner wheel arch centre divide and the outer quarter panel, both sides. And those panels will be bonded in once the car's built. Those will be painted along with all the rest of the parts of the car, and then those will be bonded in later on in the build process. They bond onto the quarter panel and onto the inner wheel arch and onto the inner wheel arch divider here, and they bond in there and basically separate again the inside of the quarter panel ahead of the wheel arch from the inside of the quarter panel behind the wheel arch. So again, the area with fuel related things in it is again separated from the rest of the car. So Sam's been working on templating those bits up. getting this stud welded in under here, making these closure panels, putting the stud welds on, and then also in each corner, each side here, there's an oval cutout. Again, those familiar with Escorts will know there's an oval cutout each side in the rear parcel shelf, which I believe, looking at the structure of the car when you have these apart, was probably originally for a spot weld access when spot welding the panels together. And again, it's an aperture that goes directly from inside the car into the boot aperture, so we have no need to access any spot welds through there anymore. So Sam's TIG brazed closing panels into those oval holes as well, so that all that's isolated from inside the car. And I think that pretty much gets us on that marathon of explaining stuff, gets us to the end of the Escort theme. So that's where we're at with that. Moving on past the Redux BMW, you'll see the remains of some scanning spray on here. We've been doing some 3D scanning on this for various reasons, all of which will become evident through Redux. But yeah, that's what we've been up to on that. That's been having some 3D scan work done on it, and then that's going to be put onto the select jig that's hiding behind Bobby's toolbox. That's the next step on that. But that's currently that's what that's doing there, and why it's got what looks like watermarks all over it. It's very slow. It's sublimating scanning matting spray. But the problem is it's pretty cold at the moment, so it's taking an awfully long time to sublime off. So that's why it looks a bit watermarked. Then we're going to go down this corridor, which is a place we've not really been very often. We probably should have painted this wall when I did the refit, but we're going to go down the little corridor, in the body shop access corridor. Oh, and the guys have turned the lights off. Oh, we're going to have a big reveal, are we? We're into the body prep area where we have a painted Charger. The main body shell paint is done. The panel, well, the first chunk of panel paint is being done now, and the guys have actually started, Mark and Steve are in here, have actually started on the wet flatting already. We gave this a second bake. We baked it yesterday. We only baked fairly low. We had a low bake yesterday evening just as Gaz finished, which was pretty late, and then guys have just given it another little bake this morning, then wheeled it round, put it back on the rotisserie again in here, because the access, trying to reach over this thing, it's that flipping big that it's pretty hard to even wet flat it without it on the rotisserie. So they've stuck it back on the rotisserie for the wet flatting, and that's what's happening now. But it's very nice. The finish was extremely good straight away. The usual few little bits of dirt in it, nothing too drastic. Really happy with how it came out. We were it was a little bit tense because there's an awful lot of material involved. I mean, just the cost of the actual base coat in the quantity needed for a car like this is pretty big. You know, there's when people talk about £1,000 resprays, just to put it in perspective, there's pretty much almost exactly £1,000 worth just of base coat just to do the top part of the car, not including the underside. So that puts it in perspective. That's just the base coat, just to do the upper part of the car. So just the material cost to us. So it's not a cheap operation. But yeah, the wet flatting is going on. You can kind of see in the engine bay, because obviously no flat. We won't do any flatting in that area. There's no point. We might give it a little polish here and there, but there's no need to flat that. So you can actually see apart from where we've got bits of water that are flicked in there, you can actually see the end result there, and the colour is absolutely stunning. I've already forgotten the name of it. It's Green Gem, isn't it? It's Ford Green Gem, isn't it? It's called. Yeah, the colour is Ford Green Gem. Which is it's a current Ford USA production colour. I think some Transits might be in it as well. But it's an absolutely stunning colour, and it's very, very similar to the original colour of the car. So it was a fairly easy decision for all, really. And yeah, it's looking absolutely stunning. And say down here, the Mark and Steve are on with the laborious task of making it look terrible for a while before it looks really good. But yeah, lots of wet flatting, which is going really well actually. It's going. They've already done the roof. Oh, have I spoken too soon now? I've jinxed the job now. They've already done the roof. They've done most of this quarter. Nobody's found any primer yet, which is good. I'm doing my best to really jinx this job. Yeah, it's flatted up really nicely. It's gone on. If the paint goes on well and stays nice and level, and the slight orange peel that you get is very fine and level, then the flatting goes really well, and there's no tears, and everything works well. So
ready for the orange overcoat.
Yes. We've got to put the numbers on the side and paint it orange then. But yeah, we're getting on. This is the first stage. So this is 1500 grit, wet and dry, used very thoroughly wet. Door to the fabrication shop, sealed shut, no access that way. Have to come in through the corridor that way to try and give the grit and dust a longer path to landing on the car while we're wet flatting it. So that's been done. And what we're going for then, we're going 2000 Trizacs or 2000 wet. Yeah. So we're going 2000 grit wet and dry after this by hand again, and then we'll go 3000 grit wet Trizac discs on the DA. And pray we don't get any grit in it while we're doing it, and then we'll go compound, just to try and speed up the job a little bit through to get into the compound stage. But it's looking really, really good. Lots of stress, but it's actually looking good. Yeah. So the glass finish will be forthcoming, but the little enticer on that is the engine bay, because that's looking extremely good. It's just winking at me again through there and looking really rather smart. So yeah, coming along, and hopefully we're going to have a very excited owner able to come and, well, you can come and have a look at it any time, but definitely next week, once it's polished up, be able to get the full effect of it. What it really needs is to go out in the sun, of course, and that's the challenging thing that we're missing a bit at the moment. But we can shine some lights at it to pick because it doesn't really show very well until you can actually see the metallic, till you can actually see the pearl and metallic showing really well. But yeah, really pleased with how this one's going. Hopefully, Gaz is having equal success in the booth. I mean, I've just seen him come out, so I think he's just done another coat of base coat. He spent quite a lot of hours yesterday in the booth, and he's in there for quite a few hours again today. There's a lot of area to cover, and it's quite a time-consuming process getting all the water-based base coat to dry. Even with we've got quad blowers in the booth, and that speeds up the base coat drying. But the water-based base coat is quite a time-consuming process to get it to dry. You can't rush it, you can't put heat on it. You give it too much heat, it skins over and doesn't dry properly. So it's just a job of patience. But yeah, hopefully next week you should be able to see this paint finished and all the panels paint finished, and yeah, we'll see. We may not have all the panels on at that point, but we should have all the paint finished on this and all the panels finished and flatted and polished. So yeah, watch this space on all that. And I think, once again, that pretty much rounds up where we're at this week. So until next time, have a good one. We'll see you then.